Hello, everyone. This is Josh Valentine, Communications Manager with the Clean Coalition. Welcome once again to another webinar under the PAEC Initiative, the Peninsula Advanced Energy Community Initiative. This webinar is the 6th in our series, Accelerating the Transition to a Clean Local Energy Future. The webinar will be 1 hour long, and we're going to be having 2 presentations, followed by a Q&A session. Q&A session, you can enter your questions into the GoToWebinar control panel as seen on the screen here. If you ask a question, we will try our very best to get to it at the end of the webinar. The webinar recording and slides will be sent to registered attendees within 2 business days. All webinars are then archived on clean-coalition.org and our YouTube channel. And if you have any technical questions regarding this webinar or future webinars or any general questions, you can contact me, Josh, at clean-coalition.org. The presenters that we have today are Justine Burt and Dr. Kristin Kuntz-Duriseti. Justine is the founder and CEO of Apricel. She has 18 years experience as a sustainability project manager for advanced energy communities, waste prevention, and alternative transportation projects. She applies proven economic, policy, and behavior change tools to successfully implement lasting change for government, university, nonprofit, and private sector clients. Justine has degrees in economics and environmental policy. Dr. Kristin Kuntz-Duriseti is managing editor of Climatic Change, an international journal publishing interdisciplinary research on the description, causes, and implications of climate change. To support responsible and progressive sustainability policies, promote renewable energy projects, and shift our community to a low-carbon future, Kristin has served as an Environmental Quality Commission for Menlo Park, California, and is a current board member for Menlo Spark, a nonprofit initiative working toward climate neutrality in the city. So let's get right to the presentations. We're going to start with Justine Burt, and I'm going to pass it along to her.
All right, thank you, Josh. Welcome, everyone. I'm excited to share, let's see, I'm going to do a slideshow here. I'm excited to share with you what Peninsula Advanced Energy Community has been doing over the last 21 months. Today, we're going to talk about what PAEC is, what the ideal clean energy future looks like, advanced energy communities. We're going to talk about policy goals and existing regulatory structure, just to show what a solid foundation we have here in California. We're going to talk about key challenges that PAEC realized to realizing this advanced energy community future. We'll talk about best practices, key findings. Kristin's going to give us an overview of some amazing case studies, members of our community who are, businesses and institutions that have already done most of the build out, and then talk about tools to accelerate to AECs, the project benefits, and a few of the nagging questions that remained after we finished that we feel like merit future study. Then we'll open it up to your questions. All right, so what is Peninsula Advanced Energy Communities? For the last 21 months, the nonprofit Clean Coalition has been leading a team of 12 Clean Coalition staff and subcontractors to figure this out. We had $1.3 million of funding from the California Energy Commission, which was nice, and our core PAEC region is southern San Mateo County, although we have partners who are in the surrounding areas, pulled in the city of Palo Alto because they're doing such innovative work, and various private company partners, municipalities from San Mateo County, other nonprofits. It's really been an exciting group of people, very talented, very passionate about building advanced energy communities. So basically, we're trying to accelerate deployment of AECs, reduce the cost and uncertainty of permitting and interconnection. I'll talk more about that later. With PAEC, we're trying to reduce 25 megawatts of peak energy across southern San Mateo County because we're trying to get away from fossil fuels. We're trying to reduce natural gas and electrify things, which will allow us to obviate expensive utility upgrades and not need to do those. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we want to figure out which projects are replicable and scalable so that they can be repeated elsewhere. So you're not meant to read all this. I just wanted to show you there are 31 different reports. Most of them are up on the Clean Coalition website. If you look under Peninsula Advanced Energy Communities, you can read these. And what's cool is that they're pretty quick reads. Like you can, in just a minute or two, you can get a lot of great information out of that. So we want to let you know these resources are there. So what's your ideal? What's an advanced energy community? Meet zero net energy standards for the built environment. They take advantage of local renewables, demand response, solar emergency microgrids, which I'll talk about more in a minute, and electric vehicle charging. And the point is to help the state realize clean energy and climate change policy goals. And of course, there are other benefits, not just energy savings for anybody who has an energy bill, all ratepayers who contribute to this, but it also minimizes the need for new energy infrastructure, helps the grid be more reliable and resilient, and we're shooting for easier grid integration for these advanced energy community resources. And while there are new buildings going up, we do have all these existing buildings, 9 million single family homes, 3.1 million multifamily, 600,000 commercial buildings, everything you see in the bottom right graphic. That's a lot that needs to be retrofitted, and advanced energy communities can help us get there. So one really cool thing that came out of this is that we did a solar siting survey. So we looked at southern San Mateo County and tried to figure out how much solar potential there was there. So this is an area that is already highly developed and has a dense tree canopy. And given that, we were looking for places that could host 100 kilowatt commercial solar system or larger, and we found a lot of them. And they were mainly in 3 areas. They were either on school rooftops, they were on parking lots, or parking garages. So there's 65 megawatts of solar potential in just southern San Mateo County that we could be tapping into. How do we accelerate deployment of this solar potential? That's one of the key questions. Another key piece of the advanced energy communities, I mentioned solar emergency microgrids. So this is really interesting because when we talk about resilience, we talk about our community, our society's ability to bounce back from shocks that happen. So when there's a natural disaster, there are certain critical loads that have to be able to function. And so at a bare minimum, there are 1,000 sites in California that need to have solar emergency microgrids. So when there's a natural disaster, the police and fire need to be able to respond. They have to have emergency response centers that function. There are 482 municipalities in California. They all need at least one emergency response center, which I know they have, but if you have solar and energy storage and electric vehicle charging, you can still continue to function in a clean, resilient way. Hospitals, there are 345 hospitals in California. And many of them are going around and counting circuits right now. They have diesel backup generators, which are not clean, but they could have solar emergency microgrids. And so they're trying to figure out what's the bare minimum we need functioning if there's a natural disaster. We need an emergency room. We need one operating room. We need intensive care units to function. We need this number of lights. Like, what's the bare minimum critical load that needs to be running? And then they're sizing the amount of solar and energy storage to be able to meet that need. So those are potential sites in California, over 1,000, almost 1,000 potential sites in California that should have solar emergency microgrids as we're planning for this. So we're in this state, and I'm so proud to be in California because our state cares about clean energy goals. And there's a really strong foundation already of policy goals and regulatory structure that support building out advanced energy communities. So we're all familiar with Global Warming Solutions Act, AB 32, and how it said, let's get to 40% reduction in greenhouse gases below 1990 levels by 2030. It said 50% renewables by 2030. Just so proud to be in a state that's willing to go out and set that goal. Title 24, we all have seen the graph that shows energy use per person has stayed relatively flat in California over the last few decades, whereas in the rest of the United States it's gone up per person. That's because of Title 24 and now because of CalGreen. So the 3-year cycles that Title 24 talks about that makes us increasingly energy efficient is getting us there. And over 30 years, Title 24 has meant there have been 12 power plants we have not had to build. The CPUC Long-Term Energy Efficiency Strategic Plan is the one that said by 2020, all new residential construction must be zero net energy. By 2030, new commercial construction must be zero net energy. By 2025, state net, and by 2030, 50% of existing commercial must be retrofitted to be zero net energy. Just quickly, the CPUC Integrated Resource Plan talked about, of course, we want to have a safe, reliable, cost-effective electricity supply, and the way we get there is by prioritizing first energy efficiency and demand response, then renewables, then clean fossil generation. AB 117 was a community choice aggregation that allows cities and counties to aggregate their purchasing power and buy renewable energy. EVCI in rental properties, AB 2565 basically said, and I'm so glad this went in, it required property owners to allow residents to install EV charging stations in their assigned parking space, which is really helpful. And then in terms of energy storage, AB 2514 talks about how California IOUs should procure viable and cost-effective energy storage systems through rate-based purchasing and contracts. And it set a goal, 1.3 gigawatts of energy storage to be available by 2020. So that's what's going on at the state level. And then in terms of the cities within the PAEC region, Redwood City got an award from the Department of Energy for leadership in advancing solar with their streamlined solar permitting inspection process. Atherton has set a goal of 100% renewables for municipal buildings. Menlo Park, down where Facebook is on the Bayfront district, said all new construction must meet 100% of the energy demand through renewables, 30% on-site, and they must do on-site renewable energy feasibility studies. East Palo Alto joined the Peninsula Clean Energy so that their citizens can buy renewable energy if they want to, even if there isn't solar on their building. So that's what's going on in terms of the foundation of goals and regulatory structure. So with that in mind, PAEC was taking a look at, so what are the key challenges? We know what an advanced energy community should look like. What's standing in our way? And I'd say that there are really two baskets of challenges. It's either economic or it's policy. That's what's standing in the way. And in terms of economics, it's often, so often people make the decision on what to buy based on the initial cost. Well, this one's cheaper, so I'm getting that one. So a lot of PAEC's analysis really looked at life cycle cost assessments. So benefit cost analyses, looking at more than just initial costs. Because if something is net present value positive, if it pays for itself with cost savings over the life of equipment, then you should probably do it. If we're just looking at initial costs, a lot of these components for AECs might not look like they make sense. So that's one of the challenges, getting people to look at life cycle costs and benefit cost analyses when they do their decision making. Another challenge is the capital versus operating cost challenge. Different people are usually overseeing the operating budget and the capital budget, and sometimes those are at odds. Split incentive's a big one. Most businesses rent their space. A lot of residents own they rent where they live. So there's a split incentive. The tenant may pay their energy bill, but it's not their building, so why would they upgrade and add value to their property owner's building? Meanwhile, the property owner may not be paying the energy bill, so why should they invest more in the building to save money for the tenant? There are ways to overcome this, but that's one of the big challenges. Falling prices have not fallen far enough, so this is true with energy storage, and we'll talk about this more in a minute. Economies of scale, many of the components for AECs do not enjoy the same economies of scale that technologies that have been around for 50, 80, 100 years do. There are limited finance programs, and there's the question of who should fund AEC. Should it be the utilities that won't have to build new power plants? Should it be the utilities that are looking at Diablo Canyon going offline? And so that's quite a bit of electricity that has been generated that won't be in the near future. Should this be a private sector thing? Should it be public-private partnerships? These are some of the questions. And then in terms of the policy bucket, there are two main gatekeepers here that are ensuring clean, reliable, safe, cost-effective energy in the future. So the utilities and the municipalities, and we need to help them be more efficient. So particularly at the municipal level, I'm going to talk about the utility level in a minute, but at the municipal level, if they're facing an increasing number of permit requests through the building permit department for energy efficiency upgrades, distributed generation, EV charging, microgrids, and energy storage, and yet they have the same number of staff to handle the permits, we need to help them get more efficient. So those are the major challenges we're looking at. The best practices report was really interesting because Menlo Spark took a look at best practices that we might want to replicate in scale in the PAEC region based on people who have already innovated and tried different things. And so there's some really interesting stories in there if you get a chance to take a look. Here are some examples. So in terms of renewables, the city of Lancaster down in Southern California requires new construction, new residences to put in solar. So somewhere between 0.5 to 1.5 kilowatts of solar, so 2 watts per square foot. San Francisco requires commercial buildings to do energy audits and to load their energy use index score into a database, and then everyone can see everyone else's score. So you can go in and see if your commercial building is twice what your competitors is, and that obviously provides an incentive to become more energy efficient. City of Watsonville has done something really cool. They have a climate impact fee, and so they levy it on new construction, and you get part of the fee back if you do energy efficiency, and you get all of it back if you do zero net energy. So it's a really strong incentive to do zero net energy. EV charging infrastructure, City of Fremont requires 10% of parking spaces to be EV ready. That means an EV to pull in and charge commercial and multi-unit dwellings. And then in terms of energy storage, Redwood City has done 5 public EVCI projects and has done it through a public-private partnership, so it didn't cost the city anything up front. So these are some of the best practices. I encourage you to take a look at it because we talk about economics and policy solutions that cover these different issues. All right, so key findings. Again, 3 buckets here: economics, policy, and technical. So it's really interesting. The future financial viability of energy storage. The 7 reports that Sovereign Energy did were so interesting. So they basically said energy storage prices have fallen 40% between 2014 and 2016, and it will continue to fall as competitors sales teams are incentivized to make the market. So the Tesla Gigafactory really pushed prices down. Tesla created 8,000 megawatt hours of energy storage versus 500 megawatt hours of stationary energy storage. But a lot of the energy storage projects still require support, grants, financial incentives to be financially viable. Bundling energy efficiency refers to this graphic you see here. So DMVGL did a report that looked at 5 different types of prototypical buildings. So a school, a multifamily, a retail, office, municipal, meaning fire station. And they basically said, you know, people often cherry pick 1 or 2 energy efficiency measures, but we bundled 8 energy efficiency measures, and we found just for an office, doing all 8 of them is still going to have a payback within about 5 years. So the internal rate of return is 18%. Try to get an 18% annual return on most investments, you're not going to get it. So bundling all of these energy efficiency projects together and just doing them is cost effective, we found. So findings that municipalities would love model ordinances. They'd love to have somebody else do the work and write up and vet model ordinances so they can just put their name on it and get it in place. And so we actually did that. We found that while there are many financial tools, they are still inconsistent. It's kind of a Swiss cheese, a lot of holes in it still, opportunities to do more. So with respect to policy findings, we found very context specific. So just within San Mateo County and southern San Mateo County, we have Atherton, which is a very wealthy community, and East Palo Alto. And Atherton, a lot of the buildings were built before the Title 24 standards. And so the average home in Atherton uses 3 times the amount of energy that other homes in San Mateo County does. And so there's a real opportunity to focus on deep energy retrofits, which could yield 30 to 40 reduction in energy use in Atherton. Meanwhile, in East Palo Alto, energy bills tend to consume about 20% of the family's income. And so there's an opportunity to help them through pay as you save programs to pay for energy efficiency retrofits up front and then share the savings with the tenants. Streamlining interconnection. This report was fascinating. So Clean Coalition studied the fast track program with Pacific Gas and Electric and looked at 209 different commercial wholesale distributed generation projects and found that 82% of them either dropped out or did not get approved. So only 18% got through the process. And the ones that got through the process, it took between 6 months and 2.3 years. There's an opportunity to streamline the fast track interconnection process, and Clean Coalition is working with PG&E on this. It's a sophisticated permitting program. It's evolved for very, very good reasons to where it has arrived to, but now it's time to streamline it. So at the same time, there's an opportunity to streamline permitting at the municipal level to look at streamlining cost, timelines, documentation requirements, inspections, making sure those are consistent and transparent and predictable. Findings, so we talked about the 65 megawatts of commercial solar potential in southern San Mateo County, minimum 10 kilowatt project rather, and then the EVCI master plan, which is the next slide. So this is really interesting. Sven Thiessen and Associates did the EVCI master plan for us, and he mentioned to me that there are all these things that municipalities can do to support electric vehicle charging infrastructure build out without spending a lot of money. In fact, spending almost nothing. And here are the 5 things they could do. Create stronger code requirements for level 2 charging at multi-unit dwellings and workplaces. It's a lot cheaper when you do it during new construction or major renovation. Also, municipalities can encourage DC fast charging stations at transit corridors. We have EVs now that have a much longer range, 200, 300 mile range. And so we need more transit corridor EVCI, and it could be paid for, owned, operated by third parties. Encouraging building owners to secure grants from public agencies. Encouraging people to put out public signage so that people driving by on the road will say, oh, there's another EV charging station, there's another one, so that non-EV owners will see there are plenty of places to plug in and might eventually take the leap and buy one. And finally, hosting or encouraging EV ride and drives to educate people about it. Once we can get them in an EV, they might love it. All right, so I have 2 more quick slides and I'm going to hand it over to Kristin. So I just wanted to mention about energy storage because Sovereign Energy did 7 reports on this, and it's really the most poorly understood of the 5 different components of AECs is energy storage because it's so new. And so this Rocky Mountain Institute graphic shows 13 different services that energy storage provides. And so you've got customer services of backup power and demand charge reduction. You've got utility. There are benefits to the utilities. There are benefits to the independent service operators, whether at the transmission, distribution, or behind the meter on the customer side of it. There are all these benefits. And one of the reports Sovereign did took the integrated financial pro forma spreadsheet and took 50 inputs costs for equipment, permitting, installation, incentives, operations and maintenance, annualized revenue expenses, looked at the depreciation schedule, looked at sources of financing. Is it going to be equity, debt, incentives? And found that when energy storage does double duty, it's more cost effective. So if we can value these other resilience components, then it pencils out. So where it can not just be renewable energy storage, but it can also do peak shaving or load shifting or power conditioning, provide spinning reserves, backup power in the event of an outage, then we can justify it. So those are the major findings. And now I'm going to turn it over to Kristin.
Oh, hi, there you go. I apologize. That was a little delayed on my part. Didn't do that as smoothly as I had done it earlier today. Good morning, this is Kristin. So what I'm going to talk about today are the case studies that that PAEC was involved in. We did some research, and then we got some projects going, and then we have some planned. One of the things I think is really great about them is they show the variety of cases that might be applicable to different users. So we've got county level, we've got residential, with Atherton is largely residential. We've got communities that have a lot of, and areas that have a lot of commercial buildings. We have low income areas. We've got, public owned, we've got public-private partnerships, completely privately owned. And so we really give a range of cases. So there's sort of something here that's applicable for everyone. So the first case that we're really excited about, Clean Coalition had been involved in for a really long time, and that is the Town of Atherton Civic Center. And so right from the very beginning, the Town of Atherton prioritized sustainability goals. And the value of that was that it really enabled all of the stakeholders and the planners and architects to really reduce the energy use, really maximally take advantage of energy efficiency features to have a really small energy footprint. And that resulted in energy usage that was a third of typical building design. And the thing that's really exciting about this project is it's still on track to be the first zero net energy civic center in the United States. So I think that's really something that's exciting. The other thing that's very innovative about this project is it is a solar emergency microgrid that not only supports critical services, but also supports administrative functionality beyond that emergency response. And even there are plans to serve as a meeting center in the event of an emergency. As part of the planning process, the city and the staff and the council members worked with Clean Coalition to develop a scorecard where they actually put measured metrics, not just financial ones, not only those, but also ones that valued environmental goals and educational goals, because serving as an educational component to the community was really important to the stakeholders and the city leadership. And then as a note, one of the things we really see in the projects is that there are lots of co-benefits, and particularly with respect to advanced energy communities, it's that dovetail relationship with meeting climate action plans and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So in this case, there is no gas planned for the Civic Center at all. We're able to completely remove all gas from that. So this is an overhead site of the site. And so the buildings on the left are the police department and administration, and on the right, on the bottom right is the library, and kind of in the center there is the historic council chambers, which the city preserved. That really set the tone for the design because it has really those really thick mission walls, and the architectural design really took advantage of that and got sort of really thick walls in terms of providing extra insulation. They were also able to, you can see along here, this is a really nice view of the PV system that's installed along the rooftops, One of the challenges of this site was that it has this beautiful oak canopy. The urban canopy here is lovely, and of course we wouldn't want to compromise that, but there's this trade-off between PV availability and the tree canopy. So the potential for PV was quite limited, and so it was really challenged to really reduce the energy footprint on the site. So in terms of the architectural features, they really have a really well-insulated building envelope. They have a lot of shade with overhangs, roof overhangs, and strategically placed windows. There's a lot of natural ventilation use of windows and skylights, and those are managed automatically, as well as having some user-operated windows to maintain the comfort level of the interior buildings. The library, to match the elevation of the surrounding buildings, actually has an underfloor ventilation system, which allows a lot of passive ventilation and heat exchange in conjunction with operable windows that provide a really comfortable ambient temperature, and it's really healthy, and it's quieter because they don't have to have those fans blowing all the time. So if the challenge was sort of meeting that low PV, the solution was to reduce the energy usage intensity of the buildings. And so the top graph on the right shows you what the buildings had been using before, and then the bar on the left shows what we anticipate the building energy usage intensity to be once all these features are implemented. And again, you sort of see how they're pancaked together, that it's this combination of making these adjustments at every single level that makes a difference. And the thing that's remarkable to me about so many of these projects is the technology isn't really advanced. It is standard state-of-the-art stuff. We're talking about insulating walls, using high efficiency windows with glazing, that you're sort of trying to balance daylighting so you don't have to use as much light with the thermal performance so you're not getting so much heat. Daylight sensors, motion sensors, you have some manual controls for users to adjust, but also a lot of automated features that turn lights off when they're not being used. In that case, we were able to reduce the lighting by 2/3 relative to regular construction. And then the other thing that's really exciting about this project is using heat pump technology. And that was a really critical part of achieving net zero energy for the Civic Center. So it uses heat transfer from for hot water, and that's the way they were able to eliminate the use of natural gas boilers. So they have pipes that are running through the buildings, and they have radiant ceiling tiles in the ceiling that have the hot and cold water that flows through and adjusts the ambient temperature. The part of achieving the zero net energy is this idea of being able to shift the cooling of the water to nighttime when energy rates and energy demand is less. And so the bottom graph shows you what it would be like without thermal water storage tanks to do that. And then the graph on the right shows how we're able to basically eliminate the cooling and have that happen at night when those energy rates are lower. So you're able to shave the demand from the peaks during the day and take advantage of the capacity at night. A corollary effect of this, again, I think you see all these synergistic effects when you combine the advanced energy features, is that they were able to reduce the overall size of the heat pump, and that's what allowed the PV to match the demands. So just to show you a little bit about how that solar emergency microgrid is going to be working, right here you see the police department and administration. The red here, it's a little hard to see in the graph, but the top building shows that those are the components of the building, the areas that would be backed up by the solar emergency microgrid. The district solar emergency microgrid is really, really novel. Certainly other police departments have installed these, but Atherton is the first, as far as we know at this stage, on track to support not only emergency functioning, but the administrative building as well. And the emergency part, the sort of really critical features can be maintained for up to 4 days, even under the worst weather conditions. Under good weather conditions, the Civic Center can operate indefinitely, and I think that's very exciting. So then the next slide shows the library, and so this sort of orange shaded regions are the part of the library that would be maintained as an emergency center. So it could function as an emergency shelter if needed. Again, it could operate indefinitely under good weather conditions, and under the worst weather conditions, it could be backed up for a whole day. So the zero net energy potential includes not only meeting the demands of the day-to-day functioning, as I've described, but also allows for the potential to have even positive net energy, which means that on a regular basis, the Civic Center would produce more energy than it consumes. And that's even incorporating a 10% safety overhead margin. So we're really excited about this project. They're going to be breaking ground soon, and hope to see this up and as an educational tool for the community before too long. So the other case study that we explored, and just want to sort of really highlight this, is at Stanford University. Several years ago, about a decade ago, Stanford was taking stock of its energy needs, and they had a cogeneration plant that was aging, an aging facility, and so they were exploring how it was that they were going to replace that system. So they developed this group called the Stanford Energy System Innovation, CC, and through that process, which was a very deliberate, thoughtful process that explored options and had a lot of stakeholders meeting and really innovative thought leaders involved in this process on campus. They designed the Central Energy Facility, which is what you see here. And one of the things that really occurred to Stanford as they were assessing their needs is that there's this sort of nearly complete overlap between their heating needs and their cooling needs. And so the graphic on the bottom right shows you that. During the summer months, there is quite a bit more need for cooling, but they realized that there was no sense in sort of taking energy to heat at the same time they were taking energy to cool. And so the Central Energy Facility takes advantage of that overlap in needs and does this sort of the heat transfer through the chilled water tanks and the hot water tanks that you see here. So that heat recovery process, where you have that overlap between cooling and heating, takes place on the left side of the facility, where they're swapping that thermal energy between hot and cold. And then if they need additional heating during the winter months, there are hot water generator heaters. And then for cooling, they do have capacity for doing that through chillers, and they do have cooling towers. And again, as I explained in the Civic Center case, you can take advantage of the cheaper energy rates and lower demand during nighttime hours to chill your water, rather than doing it during the peak day when you have the demand for it, but those energy rates are higher. This is a really globally relevant feature, this overlap between heating and cooling. The International Energy Association estimates that unrecovered waste heat accounts for 47%, nearly 50% of energy consumed globally, and 40% in developed countries. So being able to take advantage of this overlap is really, really exciting. The other part of that about the Stanford project is that most of our research points to the idea that we can sort of pancake together, we can stack together technologies that are already existing out there. But what's really exciting about Stanford's project is they are pushing the boundaries of what is technically feasible, learning from their experience and rolling it out. So this is a picture of the campus, and I just threw this in there because you can see that it shows that there's these 22 miles of separate underground hot and cold water pipes that Stanford installs. So you get a sense that this is a huge project that Stanford was undertaking. They have heat exchangers in every single building where those underground pipes come up against the heat exchanger in the building, and then they swap out the thermal energy to provide the ambient temperature inside the buildings. And that this way they were able to supply 90% of the total campus heating needs. So it's very comprehensive. I set that up because it really gives you a sense of scale of the project. But what's really amazing to me is that when Stanford went through and thought very deliberately about the options that were available to them, the central energy facility, along with digging up the campus and installing all of those 22 miles of pipe, actually ended up being the cheapest option available. So the first column here on the left shows you if they had just stayed with the business as usual scenario and not made the change at all, that was the most expensive option. And then as you go through, you sort of talk about if they had the different modeling options they were exploring. One was maintaining the same technology, but just putting in newer and more efficient equipment, all the way down to sort of this really innovative district energy with the heat recovery that I explained. And the last two columns talked about installing photovoltaic energy along with that. And you can see that installing the photovoltaics further reduces the cost marginally, but it does affect that. And it also has these ancillary benefits in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. Stanford ended up installing 5 megawatts of PV on their campus rooftops, plus they have a 68 megawatt offsite facility. The graphic also shows you again how these co-benefits go together. The little diamond shows you the greenhouse gas emissions, which is dramatically reduced in the case as we explore the options and move towards the heat recovery models with PV. You can see how the gas is virtually eliminated. The capital expenses are more in this case, but again, because you are able to reduce your maintenance and energy use charges over the life of the facility, your overall costs are dramatically reduced. Just some other components that CEC has that I just wanted to point out. They have an hourly dispatch plan. They developed a patented predictive control model that includes about 1,000 variables, talking about input prices, energy uses, weather predictions, and they produce hourly dispatch plans that are continuously updated every 15 minutes. And that single feature, that demand management feature, further increases the efficiency by 6%. Around campus, they were also looking at other ways to reduce their demand by consolidating computer servers, using energy efficient cooling. Saves the university $1 million a year. Behavior incentives, such as reducing plug load demands, just incentivizing that, having campus competitions, having rebates, just really incentivizing that, having facilities managers emphasize that with their employees. Reduced electricity demand 4%, and we're saving another, $250,000 a year. They've also decided that new construction should be designed to LEED Gold standards. They have real-time monitoring of building performance. You can go to the Y2E2 building. They have monitors set up all over the building. And the other exciting thing that Stanford is doing is really investing in retrofits. They have a total of 14 projects that were completed by 2015 and 12 more projects that are planned. The ones that have been completed are saving $4.5 million each year. The expected return on the investment of those retrofits is less than 7 years. The additional 12 planned projects are expected to save an additional $2.3 million a year. So we're talking big bucks in terms of doing these retrofits, these deep retrofits that mostly just revolve around HVAC equipment, just updating their HVAC equipment, yielding huge returns. And then lastly, they are electrifying their fleet and installing EVC chargers all around campus. One of the other case studies we looked at was the Jewish Community Center in Palo Alto. This one I really like because it's a private endeavor. It was voluntary. They took advantage of pretty, standard features. They have a rooftop full PV system. They have integrated occupancy sensors for lighting, heating, air conditioning, a building management system, electric vehicle stations, as you see here. And what I thought was really interesting about this is the combination of having that heat pump, which I already talked about the efficiencies of that, and they have individual heat pumps in every single residence throughout the campus. So this is a facility that's combining a community center along with sort of senior living and has about 200 units for their residents. So these individual heat pumps are allowing for adjustments right at the individual level and giving a lot of comfort and control over what's happening and giving that ambient comfort. Another case study that we looked at, again, a completely different industry, is looking at healthcare. We know that healthcare uses twice as much energy on average as traditional office spaces. They're spending, $5.3 billion a year in energy and emitting 8% of our greenhouse gas emissions. Kaiser has really taken the lead here. They understand that their mission is around health, and that extends to the environmental impacts on their health and how they're contributing to the pollution and environment around them, including climate change. One of the things that they did is they, again, installing just run-of-the-mill stuff, energy efficiency HVAC, sensors, LED lights. They did their first LEED Gold hospital in Oregon, showed them that the additional construction costs to meeting LEED Gold were minimal, only about 1% of their costs, when those standards were included as integral to the design right from the beginning. And based upon that experience, they're now requiring that all of their new construction be at a minimum at LEED Gold. They've installed 300 EV charging stations across 27 locations in California and Hawaii. And what's, I think, really notable about Kaiser Permanente is they have a really aggressive procurement plan for renewable energy, largely photovoltaics, but also wind energy. And they were able to achieve that through 20-year power purchase agreement. So this is, again, this sort of acquiring an outside vendor to provide this to them through power purchasing agreements. So they are able to meet, through all of these efforts, 50% of their energy needs at their facilities at California. And currently, they were able to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions by 30%. And this success for them has really inspired them to adopt really aggressive new goals of becoming carbon net positive by 2025. So really wonderful work they're doing there. The other thing that we wanted to highlight too is the demand for electric vehicle and the charging structure that goes along with that. These charts are from the International Council on Clean Transportation, and they're ranking electric vehicle shares in California, and you can see the Bay Area is really standing out there. Palo Alto at 30%. They jumped up from a 15 or 20% electric car share to 30% over the last year or two. So that's super exciting, the column on the left. The thing that actually, the graph on the right that is interesting is that the blue are sort of the Bay Area and what's happening in California, and then the gray is what's happening in the rest of the world. And even though we're doing great in terms of adopting vehicles, the number of ports we have per electric vehicle is lagging behind the rest of the country. What this graph is really telling us is that we really need to be doing a better job of meeting that demand for electric vehicle charging. So Palo Alto has been really aggressive in pursuing this. They've made it a priority. While EV sales in the U.S. are 1%, in California they're 5%, and as you can see in Palo Alto and locally, we're 15–30% easily. So one of the things we've realized, as Justine mentioned in the solar survey, solar siting survey, is that a lot of the potential for PV is on rooftops of parking garages and facilities where the demand for that energy produced is relatively low. So net energy metering isn't going to work for them because the net energy metering caps out the production to equal the demand. So we're missing out a lot of the capacity, a lot of the PV potential if we can't take advantage of get beyond the net energy metering restriction. So Clean Coalition has a lot of experience with feed-in tariff, which is a negotiated contract to allow the sale of excess energy. And it is an ideal model for solving this issue where you have high capacity and low demand PV sites. So Palo Alto, Clean Coalition and Palo Alto structured a request for proposal in 2014 for the solar siting leasing rights on their public parking garages. And in 2016, they executed power purchase agreements for 25-year agreements that have tiered rates, but there's a structured agreement over this 25-year. And in exchange for that, they got 1.3 megawatts of solar PV on parking garages, 18 installed electric vehicle charging ports, and the infrastructure to support an additional 80 ports for charging. Then Palo Alto was able to take advantage of some grants, and they were able to. Their plans are to install 40 of those 80 available ports using the grant money. So that's a real big increase in the number of charging units that are available to us locally. There's sort of this ongoing question of how you manage the demand for charging, especially when cars are parked there excessively. So Palo Alto has implemented a nominal fee to use the charging stations and a notification system to alert drivers. And the parking restrictions still apply, so there's a 2-hour parking restriction, and if drivers exceed that, even in the EV charging spaces, they can be ticketed. So they're sort of trying to manage those processes. Lastly, I wanted to talk to you a bit about the Redwood City Community Microgrid. This is a project that's going through sort of at different phases of development. Right here, you can see the entire region in Redwood City along 101 and Woodside Road. And there's some areas that are already sort of on the books. There are some that are in plan, and some that we're crossing our fingers and hope will work out. So I'd like to run through them really quickly so you get a sense of them. So my first case is the Redwood City Corporate Yard, and that is the orange area at the top left of this graphic. And then the second one is the Redwood City Microgrid, which is over the green square along the right, right along 101, that area over there. And then talk a little bit about the Boys and Girls Club, which is the remaining green square in the bottom left. So the first one is the Redwood City Corporate Yard. This is owned by Redwood City Public Works, and it is a critical facility during power outages, especially if there's a natural disaster. So being able to maintain service of this yard is really important to be able to provide service to the community and maintain safety. So the one thing I wanted to point out to you here is to think about if we go from a case where we are right now, which is the current situation, is the circle on the left. And then if we move to the circle in the middle, we can see that the pale orange is the energy savings from installing solar PV, which is great. But what's really exciting is if you look at the right the right circle, that shows you the savings and the energy demand reductions if we install energy battery storage as well. So the lighter orange would show reductions from PV, and the lighter blue shows you all the energy demand savings from installing battery storage along with that. So, as Justine was saying, this is sort of an emerging technology, but the potential there is huge, and that one's already coming online. The next case study is a partnership between Stanford University and Clean Coalition as PAEC has been working very diligently with them to install a community microgrid. This is a perfect example. I was talking about that Stanford case, how they were developing this really cutting edge technology with their central energy facility, and the lessons that they've learned here, they're replicating that model and providing a district energy with a sort of a minor, smaller scale of what's happening at Stanford is going to be what's installed here. So again, they're going to be having solar PV and energy storage, 52 charging units on here, again, using that very sophisticated building management optimization model to optimize the use of chilling and cooling and energy use. And this is really exciting because the plan is for it to be able to operate in grid island mode. So that means that if there were a power outage that affected the community, that there would be switches that would allow this particular community to operate independently of that. Again, the capacity for during long-term outages, the microgrid would be able to support a certain load indefinitely using a combination of that renewable energy and the energy storage. And then a corollary to this, again, you're seeing those great greenhouse gas emission reduction targets of over 50%. So a lot of co-benefits there as well. And then lastly, we have the Hoover Elementary. This is it's a combination of a park, there's a Boys and Girls Club, and a school. Again, just tying back to what Justine said about how there's this huge potential for solar emergency microgrids in municipal buildings, and schools are a great facility. You know, they already have refrigerators and kitchens. Oftentimes, in this particular case, this is already designated a Red Cross emergency shelter. So the goal would be able to provide medium and or long-term outage. And so we explored different cases to work with the school district and the city to figure out what would best meet their needs. So in one scenario, we just talked about installing solar PV and what those savings would be on the energy bill. We also explored a scenario that added EV charging, and then we talked about scenario 3, which sort of is a different of a shift. It's saying if we really wanted it to work off grid and function as an emergency shelter, how would we structure that? And again, all of these models take advantage of that battery storage. So again, you have the graph on the bottom right is showing you that if you didn't have battery storage, you would have this peak where your energy demand would be very high in the middle of the day. And instead, we can shift that, because that's when we're getting all of our solar energy, is when it's in the middle of the day, and we can shift that to store at the battery and then be able to draw down that energy during the peak period later in the day. So you can see how the load, which is the purple line, matches up with the solar generation, which is the orange line, and then how it is we can convert that to battery for use when we need it. And again, just really want to underscore the fact that without some sort of feed-in tariff, that the capacity for doing this is restricted by the net energy metering. And so my last slide here really shows that. So for the entire community that I was showing you in the first slide on the microgrid in Redwood City, if we were restricted to net energy metering, we would only be able to take advantage of 1 megawatts of solar PV. But we have so much more capacity. So if we were able to take advantage of a feed-in tariff, then we would get an additional 2.1 megawatts of local renewable energy. So again, just really underscoring how much capacity there is out there, and that the solutions are to address the finance and policy restrictions, that the technology out there is available.
All right, thank you, Kristin. So you can see how hard of a time we had in taking 31 reports and all these great case studies and getting it down to 1 hour. You'll have to take a look at them online as well. So just to bring this home, tools to accelerate AEC deployment. So where do we go from here? So there are a bunch of tools that we developed, or tools that have already been developed that we use that need to be more broadly used, like life cycle analysis and benefit cost analysis, so that people take a more holistic look at what the costs and savings are of these advanced energy community components. What we really want to get out there are the policy tools that we develop, the streamlined permitting guidelines, municipalities, permit checklists, model ordinances, green lease language, electronic approval process with e-signatures. So we have consistency in cost, timelines, documentation, and expenses. We developed a model interconnection process checklists for the utilities so that there can be transparency in the application or review process, predictable and reasonable timelines, queue management, dispute resolution procedures, and clear cost certainty. I didn't talk about green lease language much, but what we dove into there was taking the customized gross lease and using that as a template to create a situation where both the tenant and the property owner are saving, are sharing in the costs and sharing in the savings. Letters of intent are important, and so those are the basic policy tools. And then, of course, I think every county should have a solar siting survey to figure out where their solar potential is and what is developable. Building management systems, we did a report on that. It has a list of potential systems that are available and could help buildings be more efficient. Project benefits. So to wrap it up, the benefits we found were, there's a potential to save $2,000 in staff and applicant time for every commercial solar application that's going through. There's a potential. PAEC wanted to reduce, PAEC wanted to see 25 megawatts of solar put in southern San Mateo County, and that additional economic output is equal to about $116 million. There will be $35 million in local wages from construction and installation. And from that, energy consumers, anybody who pays an energy bill in the PAEC region will save $27 million. And that is looking at $12 million of peak capacity cost savings for Pacific Gas and Electric, $6 million in avoided transmission losses, $9 million in avoided transmission proportional capacity related costs. And then clean local energy will be cheaper because we'll be able to reduce the time, uncertainty, siting, financing, permitting, and interconnection costs associated with putting more clean local energy online. So those are the quantitative costs. The qualitative benefits are helping the state meet its energy policy goals, reducing greenhouse gas emissions. We'll have a more resilient grid. We'll have emergency power when we need it. We won't have to build new power plants. We'll modernize the grid, increase the percent of renewables, improve the interconnection policies, and create green jobs. So just to take it home, as we finished all of this up, we realized there are some areas for future study. We need additional financing tools. We need additional incentives to implement the AEC components. Now that we have these streamlined permitting checklists and ideas, we need to get them out to planning and building inspection staff so they can incorporate them. REACH codes cost cities generally $50,000 to $100,000 in consultant costs to study them, and so to go beyond what the state requires some considerable costs. We need to figure out ways to accelerate REACH codes and do the deep energy retrofits. We need additional revenue streams for energy storage. We need new rates and tariffs for virtual microgrids, and finally, we need people who can not just do energy efficiency or not just solar or just energy storage. We need people who can integrate all three so we can accelerate advanced energy communities. That's all I have. Josh, did you want to open it up for questions?
Yeah, Justine, we can touch on 2 or 3 questions here. Thank you so much for your presentation, and thank you, Kristin, for yours. Excellent job. And of course, we have a host of information on our website which about the PAEC Initiative and the master case study. So I will be showing you how to access those, but I do want to go over 1 or 2 or 3 questions here. This one comes from Chris Becerra, he's the CEO and owner of Terrapin. He asks, for the solar emergency microgrid in Atherton, was there an interconnection agreement that needed to be negotiated with PG&E? If so, how long did the process take? And I think that you can address that, Kristin.
Yes, I don't think there was one. I can't say with 100% accuracy because I wasn't involved with that level of detail, but in nothing that I've heard anyone talk about that was sort of an issue.
Okay, great. And then this is another interesting question. I think we should touch on this one. This comes from Claire Broom. She's a professor at Emory University. Claire asks, how are microgrids dealing with CPUC issues about distributing power across right-of-ways? And are you working with a master meter or individual meters?
Yeah, that's a great question. Again, I think I can start to answer that question, but it's not my particular area of expertise. In the Redwood City Micro Community Plan, we are running up against that issue in particular. So it's one of those areas where that restriction is the policy side. So having to negotiate that is definitely a part of it. My sense is that it will not end up being an obstacle, but it does need to be negotiated. And I think there was another part of that question that I didn't quite get.
Are you working with a master meter or individual meters? That was the second part.
Oh, right. Again, I think that's very context dependent. And it really depends on the site, the particular site. Like in the Stanford Micro Community Grid case, I know that that's one of the things they're negotiating in order to be able to put the district in grid islands mode, that they're having to negotiate that as well. So I think there's cases of both of those. And if you wanted more information about that, definitely follow up. And I know that there are other people on the project that can be helpful.
Excellent, thank you. So I'll take the last question. This is from Michael Sia. He's an instructor from UC Berkeley. Michael asks, would it be possible to share the source of the chart in slide 13? And what he's talking about is energy efficiency retrofits. So that's a good opportunity for me to show you how to access the master case study. So let me just show you that real quick. So this is where it is on page 35 of the master case study, which you can access from the PAEC landing page on the Clean Coalition website. So the way to get there is you go to our work down to PAEC, and you will see, if you scroll down the page, there are several reports that you can access on this page. We'll also have the master community design is down here, the project's back sheet, and a host of reports, and pretty much all of the reports that Justine had showed you earlier in the presentation, as well as past webinars and media coverage. So that concludes our webinar. So thank you everybody for attending, and once again thank you Justine and thank you Kristin. We will be taking a short break from these webinars, but you'll be hearing about the next one, which should be on our North Bay Community Resilience Initiative in the coming months. So look out for that email, and we will see you all next time.